Hello, DEVC 206 classmates! I am Imari Vergara, your classmate reporting on the 8th part of our Module 9, which is about the radio transmitter. Before we start our discussion, I would like to show you this iconic tower. So this is the ABS-CBN Millennium Transmitter, located in Quezon City, Philippines. Since 1969, this transmitter has been considered one of the tallest lattice towers in the world. It also became a part of our country's colorful history, like when it was taken over by state-run media and cronies under former President Ferdinand Marcos Sr.'s martial law. Although the network was shut down in May 2020, it has undoubtedly served as the former biggest Philippine media network's bridge to millions of Filipinos nationwide. So moving on to our discussion, in our module, Lustria, Tabing, and Osalia define the radio transmitter as a device that amplifies the audio frequency from the console and transmits it to the antenna system. It is a key component in radio communication as it makes on-air dissemination of information possible. First, let us discuss the history of radio transmitter to get an insight on how it evolved through time. In 1838, American inventor Samuel Morse, who we know for developing the Morse code, successfully demonstrated for the first time the electric telegraph. This proved that information can be transmitted using electric signals. Come 1864, Scottish physicist and mathematician James Clerk Maxwell presented his study on the dynamical theory of the electromagnetic field, which explains how electric and magnetic fields travel through space as waves move at the speed of light. His study inspired German physicist Heinrich Hertz to prove the existence of electromagnetic waves, which he succeeded in doing so. His findings, the Hertzian waves, are what we now know as radio waves. In 1887, Hertz created the first primitive radio transmitter, which is the spark gap transmitter. The Hertzian waves became a hot topic in the 1890s among researchers who aimed to be able to identify how to harness them in communication. Among these researchers was Nikola Tesla, who studied electromagnetic waves to create a system that would use the Earth itself as the means to conduct long-distance signals. Tesla also applied for patents for key elements in the development of radio in the US. In 1894, Sir Oliver Joseph Lodge demonstrated the possibility of wireless signaling at the Oxford University Museum of Natural History. He was able to develop an improved early radio receiver which he named the Coherer. A year later, Italian engineer and inventor Guglielmo Marconi experimented and successfully created the wireless telegraph machine. This machine allowed him to transmit Morse code over radio waves for up to 2 miles and over hills, confirming Sir Lodge's theory. He would eventually file for a patent for the first wireless telegraphy system in England in 1896. Marconi also established the British Marconi system in 1897 and began marketing his wireless communication technology commercially. He would eventually earn the title of Father of Radio for his outstanding contributions to the development of radio communication. 2 years later, his enterprise expanded to the US and dominated ship-to-shore and transatlantic communication for almost 2 decades. On December 12, 1901, Marconi sent the letter S across the Atlantic from Cornwall to Newfoundland using wireless telegraphy. This was the first transatlantic radio transmission, introducing much speculation as to the mechanism of radio wave propagation around the curvature of the Earth. Another successful transmission was done on Christmas Eve of 1906 when Reginald Fessenden transmitted a broadcast from Brant Rock, Massachusetts to ships at sea in the Atlantic. Seafarers heard Fessenden reading Bible verses and playing "O Holy Night" on the violin. This was the first successful audio broadcast by radio. Now, what makes transmissions through radio waves possible? Let us look into certain factors that affect the encoding and decoding of messages through transmitters. First, let us learn more about the parts of a sound wave. This will be helpful later when we get into more concepts. The highest point of a wave is called the crest, while the lowest point is referred to as the throw. The undisturbed position. The undisturbed position of the particles, if they do not vibrate, is called a rest or equilibrium. And then, the height of a wave from the rest to the crest is the amplitude. Here we have the wavelength, which is the distance between crests and is equivalent to one cycle. Both are measured in meters. Meanwhile, the number of waves passing a specific point per second is called the frequency. The unit of frequency is hertz, which is equal to 1 cycle per second. Frequencies can be categorized into high or low frequency. So when we say high frequency waves, these complete more cycles per second, have shorter wavelengths, and travel shorter distances before being absorbed or reflected. This usually results in high-pitched sounds. On the other hand, low-frequency waves complete fewer cycles, have lower wavelengths, and can travel farther, penetrating obstacles more easily. It is associated with low-pitched sounds. Now that we are aware of these terminologies, let us proceed with another concept, which is modulation. So modulation refers to the process of encoding a message onto sine waves, ready to be transmitted via radio waves. There are 3 kinds of modulation: pulse, amplitude, and frequency modulation. You can see here on the slide a visual representation of all 3 kinds of modulation. So pulse modulation works similarly with Morse code. The signal turns on and off again, just like a series of pulses, as the name suggests, in order to transmit the message. Next, we have the amplitude modulation or AM, which encodes messages by varying the height and amplitude of the sine waves. This is used by AM radio stations. Last is the frequency modulation or FM. This is actually the most commonly used modulation method due to its resistance to static interference. So this involves changing the frequency of waves to encode the message. FM radio stations and wireless technologies use this method. At this point, let us now take a look on how transmitters work. So it is important to note that for a transmitter to work, there should also be a receiver device. However, there are instances wherein the transmitter and the receiver are combined into one device. So this is called a transceiver. So first, we have the information or message produced. This will then be encoded by the transmitter as an electronic signal, which we call modulation signal, onto a sine wave. It will also generate a radio frequency signal, which, when applied to the antenna, produces the radio waves called carrier signal. Combining the modulation and frequency signals forms the encoding process, which is what we refer to as modulation. So now, the sine wave with the encoded information is released through the antenna and travels through the air. It will then be picked up by the antenna of the receiver device, which will decode the sine wave into a usable format. The decoding follows the encoding process but in reverse. Notably, both receiver and transmitter must have matching frequencies and modulation in order to have a successful transmission. Once the message has been decoded, the information is now available to audiences in distant areas. And now, for our usual food for thought. So, I have two questions for you guys. First, what do you think is the most problematic thing that can negatively affect radio transmissions? And second, how do radio stations overcome it? Let me know your thoughts by sharing your answers in the comments thread below. And here is a list of my references for this presentation should you wish to check them out. And that concludes my report on the radio transmitter. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye! Take care, everyone. Have a good day, night, or afternoon.